Welcome to this informational session on being smarter about employment and integrated community involvement and the ISP life areas. The purpose of this presentation is to alert service providers and support coordinators to resources that DBHDS has previously posted on their website, to further educate providers regarding the inclusion of employment and integrated community involvement outcomes into individual activities, regardless of if they have an employment or community engagement or coaching service authorization, and to promote communication and understanding between individuals, their families, service providers, support coordinators, and DBHDS offices regarding the employment and integrated community life areas. This diagram shows the DBHDS Quality Committee structure, which is overseen by the Quality Improvement Committee, or the QIC. The QIC oversees all quality activity, and underneath the QIC there are multiple committees with specified areas of focus that operate individually, including 5 regional quality councils, 1 for each region of Virginia. These are the Quality Improvement Subcommittees for DBHDS. All QII subcommittees are required to propose and complete quality improvement initiatives. These are also called QIIs. A quality improvement initiative at its most basic level is a documented effort to improve in an area of service provision. It might consist of 1 or more projects or changes that are hypothesized to have a positive effect and lead to the desired outcome. Based on the data that's been collected and discussions with providers and support coordinators, there appears to still be room for improvement in the annual planning process, specifically with including outcomes within employment and integrated community involvement life areas of the ISP. This presentation is actually part of a QII and is a method of summarizing information that's been published and making sure all involved parties are knowledgeable regarding the life areas and importance of individuals being integrated into their communities. DBHDS has made available several resources regarding quality improvement. To access these resources, please use the QR code or use the link listed below. These are the current statewide targets related to employment and integrated community involvement outcomes. They're found within the case management data measures, and the data is pulled from WAMS. Measure 3 has a target of 50% of adults having an ISP that contains an employment outcome. Measure 3B has a target of 86% of adults that are interested in employment, looking for it, whether they've been previously employed or not, that have an employment outcome in their ISP. And measure 6 is that 86% of individuals will have an integrated community involvement outcome within their ISP. Region 2, under a QII completed by the Regional Quality Council in that area, has seen improvement over the last year, and you'll see that in the data included in this presentation. Those efforts are now being expanded upon by the Case Management Steering Committee, which also is known by CMSC, and the Regional Quality Council in Region 3. There's been much progress over the last several years, but these targets have not yet been met. There are 2 key things to keep in mind during this presentation and when assisting with individual planning sessions. The first is that the overarching goal is to make sure individuals are integrated into their community as much as they would like and in a manner they prefer. The second is that a specific service is not required for the employment and integrated community involvement life areas to be used. Please know that you may hear the terms life domain and life area used interchangeably pertaining to the ISP and outcomes. So what is a life area in the ISP? The life areas in the Part 3 are adapted from Charting the Life Course framework. People lead whole lives made up of specific, connected, and integrated life domains that are important to a good quality of life. And life domains or areas are the different aspects and experiences of life that we all consider as we age and grow. Individuals and families plan for the present and future life outcomes that take into account all life domains, and they have opportunities for life experiences that build self-determination, social capital, economic sufficiency, and community inclusion. So what is special about the employment, integrated community involvement, and community living life areas of the ISP in Virginia? Well, in Virginia, the first three life areas, which are employment, integrated community involvement, and community living, are reserved for specific types of outcomes. Your employment life area should be selected for any outcomes that lead to or support ongoing employment, and this can include volunteering. The newest area, integrated community involvement, should be used if an outcome is being supported in at least one setting at a ratio of no more than 1 DSP to 3 people receiving services. The community living life area should be used for all other community-based outcomes, regardless of the ratio of DSP to individuals. Again, please note that these life areas do not have a prerequisite of any specific service. An outcome in one of these life areas could be appropriate for day services, residential, case management, and even listed as supported by an individual's natural support. As always, an outcome can be assigned to multiple service providers. And regarding integrated community involvement, as long as one setting is addressing the outcome with a ratio of 1 to 3 staff to individual, that outcome can be noted within the ICI life area and still assigned to multiple services or providers, even if the other providers are not meeting that ratio. One of the changes that were implemented previously by DBHDS through collaboration with the Regional Quality Council in Region 2 was to create an easy reference fact sheet for both integrated community involvement and employment-related outcomes. The purpose of the fact sheets were to provide definitions and information about writing these outcomes and their support activities, to clarify issues that may otherwise be confusing or overlooked, to offer examples, and to define the life areas on the individualized support plan. The fact sheets are an excellent resource for service providers and support coordinators regarding those life areas. Here's an example of what the fact sheets look like that were created. Each sheet is a one-page, two-sided document that's designed to be eye-catching and user-friendly. There's a link to the Office of Provider Network Supports page where they're located in the resources at the end of this presentation. Throughout this presentation, you may see a small camera icon on several slides. This icon represents pictures that were taken directly from the DBHDS website or from fact sheets that will be discussed throughout the presentation. For your convenience, we've also added the QR codes to reach each of these life area sheets. Within the handouts for this presentation, the actual links are located in the notes section as well. Let's take a closer look at the fact sheets. This is an example of what you'll find on the employment-related life area fact sheet. The fact sheet defines employment and employment-related outcomes. The addition of employment-related phrase was added because, per the definition, outcomes can be about what the individual wants to do that leads to employment or supports ongoing employment, which could include volunteering or other skill-building activities that lead to employment. Remember, only employment service providers and natural supports can support with paid work tasks, but other providers can assist with non-paid work tasks. The current fact sheet mentions that employment-related outcomes could include volunteering or other skill-building activities that lead to employment. There are also possible employment-related activities that can be found in this life area that are routine supports, such as assisting someone with daily living skills through the personal assistance service. The fact sheets also describe how DBHDS compiles the data related to each life area. For Measure 3, DBHDS measures the employment and employment-related outcomes by dividing the number of individuals' ISPs that have an outcome in the employment life area by the total number of ISPs effective during that time frame for ages 18 to 64. Again, the goal for this measure is 50% statewide. This measure has been proven difficult to meet, but it remains one that is regularly monitored as Virginia is an employment-first state. While the current fact sheet doesn't show how DBHDS measures employment and employment-related outcomes for individuals interested in employment, which is Measure 3B, you can see here that it's very similar. DBHDS divides the number of individuals' ISPs that have an outcome in the employment life area by the total number of ISPs effective during that time frame for ages 18 through 64 that are looking for employment, whether they've been previously employed or not. The current goal for this measure, Measure 3B, is 86%. As an FYI, this data does not include individuals that are already working, but individuals that are looking for employment. The next sections on the fact sheets provide an overview of the SMART framework, S-M-A-R-T, and how using that framework can help with writing and improving outcomes. It breaks down each part of the acronym SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Here you see the first section related to the S for specific. In order to be specific, the statement should be for one person completing one task. Avoid using the word and, which will typically combine two tasks into one statement or outcome. It should focus on the person and what is important for them to achieve what is important to them. This is the continued information about Part 3 outcomes and Part 5 support activities following the SMART framework. In Part 3, you'll develop key steps and share them across the services and supports. The M in the acronym SMART stands for measurable. To make an activity measurable, you'll need to use the skill building formula listed here. Make sure that it's a countable achievement and you're listing how often and how long. There are different ways to show measurability for skill building versus routine supports, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. The A is for achievable. The measure does not have to be something easy, but is it even something that the person can achieve with support? Take into consideration the type of support needed to attain the measure, and if the individual even wants that amount of support in their life. The R in SMART stands for relevant. Does the measure reflect the person? Also, does it make sense for the person, taking into consideration who they are and what they want their life to look like? The last letter is T for time-bound. Is there a target date for the individual to meet their goal? Skill building measures should not be never-ending. Another element might be how often are they going to work on the activities related to the measure. In addition to the details located on the fact sheets, you'll also notice that there are resources listed that could help further explain the information. Remember that outcomes should be measurable, and utilizing the SMART framework can help you ensure a successful outcome for an individual. Measurability can be shown in different ways for routine supports and skill building supports. When skill building is not being attempted, adding how often to the activity statement makes a routine activity measurable. In these examples, Tom uses weights at the gym. By adding how often, Tom uses weights at the gym 2 days a week, this makes the routine activity measurable. When skill building is being attempted, more information is needed to determine that the person is developing skill as desired. Each activity and each measure includes both how often and how long to help define the measure. So for the same example, Tom uses weights at the gym. Adding in how often and how long, Tom does 7 types of weight exercises each week for 1 month, makes this a measurable skill building activity. Here are some examples of activities that could be within an employment outcome in the employment life area. In this situation, Gracie says that she would like to work, but she has trouble sticking to a routine, making decisions about appropriate clothing, and getting started each day. Gracie and her team decided that an outcome for her ISP could be that Gracie works towards employment weekly. Key steps that the team agreed upon were that Gracie is supported by staff to explore different tasks and activities which could lead to employment. Gracie will prepare herself to be employed by practicing skills such as being on time and having clean clothing to dress for different types of employment in the community. Gracie is not currently receiving employment services, but she is receiving residential and day services. And both of these services can have activities that are under an outcome in the employment life domain. For example, for residential, Gracie and her team decided that identifying public transportation options available to get her where she needs to be, preparing clean and appropriate clothing, and using an alarm clock regularly might be some activities that were employment related that they could address with residential services. For day services, Gracie and her team decided that participating in employment readiness activities at the day program, like cleaning areas, practicing with money and sales, and discussing what she likes or dislikes about various tasks, would be appropriate activities. Remember that using the SMART framework will help to create measurable outcomes and objectives. And the examples shown here and on other slides are very generalized and would need to be worded according to routine or skill building outcome types to be measurable, as well as worded to reflect what is most important to the individual. Within the DD Provider Manual, you can find each service definition and a description of the service, the requirements and a list of allowable activities for each service, and any limitations for that service. It's important to review the information for the service being provided. That way you can ensure that the outcomes are written within the scope of that service. For employment or employment-related outcomes, you can also review activities that are appropriate for employment services to make sure you're not including those activities in any non-employment services. An example of this would be that job training is allowable under employment services, so you would not include any type of job training in a residential service outcome. For your convenience, there is a link and a QR code to the DD Waiver Provider Manual, Chapter 4, located in the Resources section at the end of this presentation. Let's take a look at some real examples of employment life area proposed outcomes that have been submitted. For in-home supports, Gracie will obtain employment in her community. The support activities or support instructions included that Gracie is being trained for an employment opportunity in her community, and that staff support Gracie by helping search wanted ads, role-playing customer service situations, leading discussions about employer and employment expectations, and transporting to job fairs and interviews. Do you think this outcome would be approved for these services? So employment training is a job coaching or employment services activity. It's not an allowable activity for this service, even though there are some key steps that could be appropriate for the service. And now let's take a look at a personal assistance example for the employment life area. This is another proposed outcome for Gracie being supported by staff while working in the community. The support activity was that Gracie is supported by staff while working in the community. Support instructions: staff will monitor Gracie for her safety while at work, assist with checking her daily to-do list, and monitor to make sure she completes assignments accurately. Would this be an appropriate outcome for personal assistance under the employment life area. There are actually a couple of reasons why this would not be approved. The first is that the service can be provided at the same time as employment services, but it can include performing functions related to the individual completing their job. That's an employment service allowable activity. The second reason is that the support activity cannot be the exact same thing as the outcome statement. It must support the outcome statement. Neither of these outcomes would be appropriate for the employment life area if they were listed under the in-home supports or personal assistance services. Keep in mind that supported activities must be included in the allowable activities for the specific service found in the DD waiver Chapter 4. That link and a QR code is located in the resources section of this video. Now let's use those same examples and revise them. So for the in-home supports example, it's been changed to say that Gracie will strengthen her life skills to prepare for employment, and includes things such as supporting Gracie by providing transportation to and from employment assistant offices, job fairs, and interviews, discussing behaviors that could be viewed as challenging by employers, role-playing positive behavior to replace those, ensuring she's taken her medicine before leaving home or has them on her person, assisting her with learning about and accessing public transportation available to her in the community. Those activities are allowable for this service, and they don't include job coaching activities. The personal assistance example, the support activity was rewritten to say that Gracie will be safe in her community while working, with instructions that staff will monitor Gracie for her safety, assist her with using the restroom, support with her taking medications, attending staff meetings, and eating during her breaks while at work. Those activities are allowable for the personal assistance service and could be placed under the employment life area. Something to keep in mind is when you submit something for approval and it is not initially approved, it could simply be the wording. It could be that the phrase that you're using is allowable under a different service or not allowable under the service that you're providing. Take the information, review it, and resubmit based on the recommendations you receive. Please remember, the examples that are shown here are not examples of outcomes written using the SMART framework, and they may not be approved by service authorization as shown here. These are just examples to help guide you in creating outcomes that are important to the person. So keeping that in mind, obtaining employment might not be what's most important to Gracie, but developing employment skills so she can work to earn more money for shopping might be what's important and might make a better outcome statement. Again, you should recognize this as the headings for the Part 3 and Part 5 in the ISP. Following these formulas will guide you through the SMART framework. Measurable outcomes are not only important to assess progress, but multiple entities assess outcomes to determine if they are measurable by reviewing the outcomes and objective statements, support instructions, key steps, and target dates. The Integrated Community Involvement Fact Sheet is set up very similarly to the Employment Fact Sheet. Again, remember that Integrated Community Involvement, or ICI, is not defined as a service, and a specific service like community engagement or community coaching is not required to utilize this life area. Multiple providers and services can be assigned to an outcome under the ICI life area as long as one meets the 1-to-3 ratio. The ratio can be specified within the key steps in the Providers Part 5 section of the ISP. The other providers do not necessarily have to meet that ratio in order for the outcome to be under the ICI life area. Again, the fact sheet describes how DBHDS measures the ICI outcomes, and it's measured by dividing the number of individual ISPs that have an outcome in the Integrated Community Involvement Life Area by the total number of ISPs effective during that time frame. And this measure is for all ages. This is measure 6. The current goal is 86%. In addition, on the Integrated Community Involvement fact sheet is information for residential and day support providers and how they can support the ICI outcomes. Remember that the activity must be person-centered and should be one that the person chooses, but you don't have to have a specific service to have an outcome within that life area. Once again, here are some real-life examples to consider regarding integrated community involvement. The situation is that Gracie likes to be in the community and would like to explore more opportunities in her area. Her team has come up with the outcome that Gracie shops at her favorite stores monthly, with key steps of Gracie interacting with others on shopping trips to clothing stores and other stores she likes at least weekly. Gracie will have the opportunity to go into the community monthly with a ratio of 1 to 3 staff to peers. Gracie is supported by staff and monitored for any identified risks and potential risks while in the community. Services that could provide an ICI outcome: residential services. Some ideas for tasks could be identifying community activities of interest, scheduling and participating in community activities such as shopping, library, clubs, churches, etc., and respecting personal space of others in the community. Examples for day services task ideas might be planning or participating in community activities, interacting with community members, respecting personal space of others in the community. Again, notice how the situation can be incorporated into outcomes and key steps for services other than community coaching or community engagement. Also, again, notice the 1 to 3 ratio may be possible for each service, but it's not required as long as at least one service can address that outcome with the ratio. As a reminder, using the SMART framework will help to create measurable outcomes and objectives. And the examples shown here are very generalized and would, again, need to be worded according to routine or skill-building outcome types in order to be measurable. Remember back to the ISP Life Area cheat sheet and the differences between the Integrated Community Involvement Life Area and the Community Living Life Area. Consider the following situations. Gracie lives in a sponsored residential home with one other individual that receives waiver services. They go out weekly to complete household shopping, and she has an outcome regarding this activity in her ISP under the Community Living Life Area. Gracie attends a day program daily. She receives group day services. She and 2 of her peers volunteer once a month at the clothing closet and are working on meeting new people and displaying appropriate interactions while they are volunteering. Gracie lives with her parents. She is asked about joining a crochet group, and her mother is supporting her by introducing her to one and its members and guidelines. Remember, if there's a ratio of 1 to 3 or better by at least one provider, the outcome is appropriate for the Integrated Community Involvement Life Area. So all 3 of these situations could have outcomes within the Integrated Community Involvement Life Area, regardless of the services that Gracie receives. So consider that Gracie is interested in clubs, various activities, churches, and employment, but she's new to the area and has never had a paying job. Now, using what you've seen today, come up with some suggestions for outcomes that could possibly be categorized into the specific life areas and appropriate for the service indicated. Feel free to pause the video while you consider these options. Here are some possible outcomes for Gracie in the employment life area. Keep in mind that the wording used on these examples is very broad. The provider would need to put into support instructions and key steps the details for these outcomes while staying away from including job training and paid employment activities. For residential, Gracie volunteers at the hospital gift store to learn customer service skills she can use in future employment. Remember that volunteering can be included in an employment life area. For case management, an outcome could be that Gracie will work in the community to make more money for shopping. And a key step for that service could be that the support coordinator will support Gracie by making a referral to DARS for an evaluation. Remember, that's an example that was listed on the Employment Life Area fact sheet. And day supports. Gracie will participate in activities at XYZ program related to various types of future paid work she might be interested in to determine which she may want to explore further, including but not limited to cleaning, sorting, and phone etiquette. Remember that the employment life area can be used for employment and employment-related outcomes within the scope of the service being provided. The services in these examples, for instance, cannot include paid employment or employment training activities, but the employment-related outcomes that are listed here could include activities and supports that would fall into the scope of each of these services. Regarding integrated community involvement, some possible outcomes that could be listed within that life area for various services might include, for residential services, Gracie will visit a new church monthly. The key steps might specify that Gracie will be joined with 1 to 2 friends, which would demonstrate the ratio needed for the ICI life area. For day supports, a possibility might be that Gracie will attend at least one community activity of her choice each month. Again, the key steps can reference more details, such as how many people are going to join Gracie. And don't forget to include natural supports in the planning process. Here's an example for natural supports. Gracie goes into her community weekly to spend time with her mother. Remember, all services do not have to meet the 1 to 3 ratio to follow an ICI life area outcome. For example, Gracie will attend at least one community activity of her choice each month. This outcome could be listed for day supports, natural supports, or residential services. The key steps are where you would specify the ratio and the provider, and as long as at least one provider or service can meet that 1 to 3 ratio or better, the outcome can be listed under the Integrated Community Involvement Life Area. Now you should have a better understanding of creating outcomes within the employment and integrated community involvement life areas, and can strive to make sure that individuals are supported by advocating for outcomes that encourage their chosen level of interaction within their community. Remember, no specific service is required in order to place an outcome within the employment and integrated community involvement life areas. All services tied to an integrated community involvement outcome do not have to meet the 1 to 3 ratio as long as at least one of them does. Every service provider should advocate for greater community involvement that will meet the individual needs of each person they support. And remember, there are resources published on the DBHDS website to assist with understanding and creating smart outcomes available for anyone in the community to utilize. Be creative and work as a team to incorporate meaningful community involvement into the plans of all the people you support. While the individual fact sheet QR codes and links were found earlier in this presentation, here are a couple of other resources that might be helpful. One is information on using the SMART framework, which was described in the November 2022 Provider Data Summary on page 24. The other is the DD Waiver Chapter 4. Feel free to use these QR codes or the links in handouts to access both of these materials. Additionally, these resources are all located with the Office of Provider Network Support's webpage, which is shown here. There are also many other resources that are not included in this presentation that can be found on this webpage. To access the information, please go to www.dbhds.virginia.gov, select Offices and Developmental Services, and then scroll down on that page to see the Office of Provider Network Supports and select the link circled. For information regarding the fact sheets, once you select that link, scroll down to the ISP Guidance, Templates, and Training, and you'll find those fact sheets along with other ISP resources. If you have further questions regarding the information in this presentation, especially if you have specific questions or situations that you'd like to discuss further, contact one of the following people to assist you. The contact information for all of the regions can be found on the DBHDS website by selecting Offices. Then for service authorizations, select Developmental Services and Waiver Services. For Community Resource Consultants, select Developmental Services and the Office of Provider Network Supports. And for Quality Improvement Specialists, select Clinical and Quality Management, the Office of Community Quality Management, and Regional Contacts. The purpose of this presentation is to alert service providers and support coordinators to resources that DBHDS has previously posted on their website, to further educate providers regarding the inclusion of employment and integrated community involvement outcomes into individual activities, regardless of if they have an employment or community engagement or coaching service authorization, and to promote communication and understanding between individuals, their families, service providers, support coordinators, and DBHDS offices regarding the employment and integrated community life areas. Thank you for attending this presentation. Please share this information with your coworkers, and we hope you'll encourage them to participate in sessions like these regarding outcomes in life areas, as well as other training sessions offered by DBHDS. A special thank you to the Office of Provider Network Supports and the Office of Waiver Network Supports, specifically the directors, CRCs, and service authorization staff, the Case Management Steering Committee, RQC2 and RQC3, for all working together to provide consistent information regarding this topic.